So what is this session about? This session is really about my journey, my personal journey, and how that maps onto a life cycle of a company, specifically in my case, a company called Sandlot Games. So my journey started in college. I was born in Russia, which is important because I actually formed a lot of my early relationships with game developers and publishers in Russia, in St. Petersburg. I got my bachelor's degree in computer science at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia. My parents told me that I can't go out there and become a composer. I needed to go and do something that would actually make some money. So I got my bachelor's in computer science. That was a good idea. If any of you have kids, I recommend you push them down the same path, because I still ended up composing music for games. But between these two degrees, I worked with telemarketing and sales, which is important because it taught me the value of perseverance and not taking no for an answer. And it's really important whether or not you're building a company, whether or not you're building your own career, or you're looking toward a future. You get yelled at so many times on the phone, you get a bit immune to that, and you learn the power of perseverance and continuing to do what you think is important. I started my career as a programmer at Kesmai. I wrote the first multi-channel sound drivers for a game by the name of Air Warrior in 1995. That was a massively multiplayer kind of arena-based flight simulator game with World War I and World War II planes. Really cool game, ahead of its time, and that's really how I started really valuing the passion behind game creation. Prior to that, as a kid, of course, I wrote my own little games and little tiny programs, but it was really my first professional experience. There were cons associated with Air Warrior. There were conferences like its own little Comic-Con associated with just that particular product. Very loyal following. So I recognize the value and the emotional connection that people have with games, and I established that myself too. Legends of Kesmai, and then I went over and started actually running the audio department at a company called Monolith, a game developer and publisher out of Seattle. And then I worked on audio for Blood and music for Shogo. And how do I become an investment banker from all that? It just becomes it's a little hard to kind of follow this stuff. But really what happened is, and here I am. If anyone can spot me, I'm the guy with the really dorky sleeveless jacket there, right up there in the middle. I look like I'm about 12, which is why I have a beard now. My wife forbids me to shave it off. But what happened to me is that I quickly saw a glass ceiling. I was working in Monolith. I was running the audio department. If you're intellectually curious, at a certain point in your life and in your career, you will outgrow your job, and that's going to happen. So think about what it means, for your future. For me, I had no idea. I was running the audio department. I worked on some great games. I went to conferences like this. I made some connections, especially made some connections in Eastern Europe because I knew some Russian developers. And so I was trying to kind of leverage those connections into a different position for myself within Monolith. So I had a conversation with Gary Kussman, CEO of Monolith. I said, well, how about, we're building all these games, and I had no idea how to build financial projections at the time. I didn't know, how to build out a waterfall model of games, and I had no idea. The only thing I knew is that we're not producing enough games here. And I know we want to get into the publishing side of the business. We want to self-publish. I knew that publishers need a big pipeline of titles, and this is back in the CD-ROM games. So I wanted to help. So I got into biz dev. I started running publishing, Monolith's publishing division. I acquired some titles for Monolith. I acquired Rage of Mages, Subterracore, a couple of others. Really got an understanding of what it takes to actually put together contracts, put together multinational agreements, and just tremendous experience. Eventually, that publishing division was actually shut down in preference for for Monolith continuing to stay a developer and an engine provider with LithTech. But that experience was paramount, and that was really my first pivot, and I never went back. By the way, I still write music for games, in case you guys are wondering. So it's still possible to do that, hold on to the creative side forever. So that's my first biz experience. Tapped into Eastern European markets. I knew Russian devs. I published Rage of Mages, Subterracore, other titles like this. Rage of Mages is a game called Allods. It was the first game published by a little company called Naval. Now it's a huge company owned by Mail.ru and out of Russia, out of Moscow. I remember when they were 12 people. And of course, there was a lot of things that happened in 2000, 2001. Needless to say, the end of PC cycle certainly did also come with that. The dot-com crash. I wanted to try a new industry. So prior to that, about just in 2000, right before 2000, I traded in game development for B2B small business software, and I was doing business development, trying to sell things that people, you think it's difficult getting into new markets and establishing partnerships. Back then, people had no idea what an ASP was and what online small business software was. And I was on the phone every day talking to Covad, Rhythms, Net Connections, other companies like that. And I saw the dot-com era boom and crash. And of course, they laid off all the employees as a result of that. So by then, I had a really solid understanding. I knew how to read contracts. I knew how to build business plans. So I joined Wild Tangent, and I put together their casual game strategy, because back before that, Wild Tangent was in the business of advergaming and really making these large builds, $200,000, $300,000 products for Nike and for Sony and those types of guys. I knew enough about the business to be dangerous. I also, in the process of doing that, it was high enough level that I actually met some people there at Wild Tangent that were on the board or were advisors to the board. And those folks became my first investors into Sandlot Games. It leads to actually an important point, which is never burn a bridge. This industry is small enough that when you burn a bridge, people will know about it. Not to say that there were bumps along the way. There were certainly disagreements and folks that I never want to work with again. But for the most part, try not to burn a bridge, because there was another talk that happened before. Your likely investors, your past employer. That was the case for me as well with my investors. There were board members at Wild Tangent. But also, Wild Tangent offered Sandlot, my company, a publishing agreement, and we ended up publishing our first games. One of which is up there called Excavation. I think it sold like 5 units. But regardless, I was smart enough at the time to really understand that we needed to keep exclusivity rights to ourselves. So the Wild Tangent kept exclusive rights for the first version. Sequel rights belonged to us. As a result, of course, we had a lower upfront payment, but we were fine swallowing that, knowing that the IP belongs to the company and we have the right to develop future versions ourselves. So that's my experience at Wild Tangent. At Sandlot, first 3 titles were Wild Tangent published. As I mentioned, there's a screenshot of Excavation, that terrible game that didn't do all that much, but it really kind of paved the way for us. Personally, the timing was right for me to bootstrap. Kids, my wife was working. I could work out of a Starbucks in Tacoma, where she was an attorney, corporate attorney. And honestly, what else was I going to do? And this resonates very much in my own career. You get to a point where you have to do something else. You have to grow into the direction, and you just have to figure out, what is that direction going to be? And that direction may actually put you in places where you never thought of before. Because if you keep hitting the glass ceiling, you'll quickly figure out a new place for yourself. So here's what Sandlot taught me over the years, and I'll talk quite a bit more about this slide here. It taught me how to bootstrap a games company. We bootstrapped it. We did a small round in 2008 of about $1 million. By then, I had enough business development experience to know how to model and build a business. And guys, I mean, this is coming from me. I come from the creative side, right? I'm the composer for all these games, right? So how would I actually even know how to approach a spreadsheet? How would I even know how to build this type of thing, right? How would I do it? Well, necessity is the mother of invention. I was the only founder. I needed to do all these things. I needed to convince all my founders to do that. But moreover, in being intellectually curious means that you go and find where is your biggest weakness and make that your biggest strength. That's been my motto throughout my entire career. Whatever I'm not very good at, I want to learn everything about it so I end up being good at it in the future. So that led me down the path of building a business. How to leverage relationships to grow your business. Never burn a bridge. Yeah, the fundraising round that we did in 2008, taught me a lot about what it means to fundraise, and exactly what are the different, levers that you push or pull to build out, to make sure that you both deliver shareholder value, but also remain in control of your company, and have enough flexibility that you could have a variety of exit options down the line, should you wish to sell. Or actually, when you're fundraising, you will sell, or that's the intention. How to market your game, how to work with both directly to consumers, market your game, but also directed through channel partners. How to manage people. No one teaches you that. It's like having a baby, right? No one teaches you really. You're going to read all the books you want, but it doesn't come with a manual. Your employees don't come with manuals. And so, they come into your office. They've got their own specific issues. They're motivated by different things. As a small startup, we couldn't pay people very much. So we motivated, here's how I motivated, and you probably motivate the same way. Motivate by your own passion. And let that be what motivates them too. All the money, all the stock options, all the other stuff comes later. It doesn't matter. If you're not passionate about, if you can't translate that to your employees, they won't stick around, no matter how much you pay them. And finally, I learned how to sell. I went through 5 M&A cycles with Sandlot. And there's this beautiful graph. I swear, if you take my card, I will send the thing to you, presentation to you. But there's a beautiful graph that shows the NASDAQ cycle of from 2002 all the way to 2011. I had the peak of my acquisition interest was in 2006, 2007, which was also the peak of the download games business. I had a good 3 to 4 acquisition scenarios, and a few of those just did not smell right. I didn't know why. Now I do, and now I have data to prove it. But back then it just there was one that was 80% earnout, right? What that means is basically you keep on working and we'll pay you. That just sounded like a salary to me. I said, well, I want to get compensated for the business that I've created, not the business that I will create for you. Let's build a structure for that. They said, well, then we'll make it guaranteed payments. It's not an earnout. It's not based on any future goals. I said, great. Well, if you've got that cash, why don't you put that cash into escrow so we make sure that actually gets distributed at those particular milestones? No, we can't put it in escrow. We're, it's too much trouble. You don't trust us? Well, now I don't. I did before, but now I don't, right? So you have these conversations and you start understanding, you start figuring out the red flags or what it takes to sell your company. So 2008 rolled around and I decided to hire a bank to help sell my company because by then I had, consistently, 1 or 2 acquisition, just inquiries every quarter. We're big enough and we are well known enough that the stuff started coming in. So I said, why don't I hire a banker? Hired a banker, and I'm not gonna necessarily comment on the quality of the banker. They're a good firm, but they send out a large 50-page book to acquirers, and and there was immediately interest. There was immediately, 3 to 4 follow-ups within the first week that I had to do. Management presentations, big, huge conference rooms. I was ready for them. I was ready to go. I've done this before. And then October 2008 happened, and the NASDAQ plunged, and crickets. No one would, no matter how good my company was, no one was returning our calls. So timing was important. So in 2008, market started picking up. I met Trip Hawkins at a banker's. I don't know how I got invited to this thing, but I got invited to a private equity conference in San Francisco. I called one of my investors. I said, "Oh, I'm over at the private equity conference put on by the Royal Bank of Canada. I'm in San Francisco. You want to meet up?" He said, "What the hell are you doing in San Francisco? Why are you paying for this flight?" I said, "Well, this is, they asked me to be on a panel, and it's an interesting opportunity." By the way, I met Trip Hawkins, who's who used to be the CEO of EA. Now he's running Digital Chocolate. He's a really cool guy. My investors still didn't understand why I went to this thing. As a result of that first conversation with Trip Hawkins, we stayed in touch. He ended up buying my company in 2011. So you never know, right? You make these connections. You never know years and years down the road when things, are going to turn around and flip, and you have a more substantive conversation. And that's really that last bullet, how to sell. How to sell is building relationships. Having those relationships translate to someone that will pay for the intrinsic value, for the strategic value that your business is going to bring to theirs. I found that extremely rewarding, that thought. So Hangovers a bitch. UpTap was a learning experience. That was my next startup. I really enjoyed selling my company, but I realized, running and operating a company is tough, and it takes a lot out of you, especially from especially how we're doing on time. Pretty good, right? Okay, so I thought I was going to come up, it was going to be short, but there's a lot to talk about apparently. I enjoyed selling my company, but operating it was tough. I didn't want to get back into that, and when I did get back into it, I did feet first. I went after it exactly the same way. But what I learned is the market changes so fast that you're really the same playbook will not work from company to company. You really need to go in at every point and reinvent yourself, especially in the games industry, right? Maybe some of these, these vertical market companies that Quorum works with, they do the same thing for 20 years and they're very successful. And the gaming industry reinvents itself consistently for two to 3 years. And really, our job as CEOs is to really look at where the ball is going to be in 2 to 3 years. Somewhat of a cliche saying, but it's true. You have to see what's going to be in the future, and really kind of that was something that really I didn't do too well for UpTap. But I did really enjoy selling Sandlot. I met Ned Burgess in Seattle, who's the president of Quorum, a boutique M&A bank that focuses on selling mid-tier companies, 2 to 200 million in revenue. I enjoyed learning about new industries. I found it fascinating. Again, I felt like I hit my glass ceiling, and I started being on the board of some new startups. So my pivot, second pivot, games market, really became a good glass ceiling for me. I realized that I really knew what I needed to know to become a banker if I wanted to. Being a CEO, if you're a CEO, you are getting an MBA. It's called the MBA from the School of Hard Knocks, but it's an MBA, especially if you're doing this for a while. And always remain intellectually curious, always grow. Games market, what really concerned me, especially now, is that the games market is a crapshoot. It's a very difficult investment climate. You can put in $2-3 million and come out the other side with nothing. Whereas before, really, with the beginning of the downloadable games business, with even the PC standalone in the console business, it was somewhat much more predictable. So what I do at Quorum, I sell companies. That's too big. That's too big of a picture of my face to be on the screen. I sell companies. I talk to 3 to 4 CEOs every day. It's like Christmas. You talk. You're always having conversation with people from different industries. I look at companies in just about every side of the tech sector, including games businesses. Games businesses are easy because I understand that industry really well. And what I like to do is leverage my own personal experience to try to get to a successful outcome for others from M&A perspective. And this is a game that I like to play called Bad M&A Banker, Good M&A Banker. So one thing that is interesting about Quorum is that the majority of our deal makers are guys like me. They're folks that ran their companies and don't have that official investment banking experience, about 10 to 20 years at Morgan Stanley. We have one guy that went to Morgan Stanley, and he would joke about it. But really, at the end of the day, the company is going to be worth what a buyer is going to pay for it. And our job as a banker is to really understand the seller's business, understand your business, and value that business on what it would mean from a synergistic perspective to a buyer, right? Say you're constrained by sales and marketing. You have a profitable game going, but you don't have enough capital to scale it up. A bad banker will judge you based on what you've done and the projections that you're going to moving forward based on what you will be able to do just organically, just by your own revenue, or maybe even if you just did a small little round, if you decided to do that. Our job as bankers is to figure out what is that intrinsic value that's generated by a strategic buyer wanting to buy you and wanting to pay premium because from day 1 or maybe day 30, you're going to be generating considerable revenue for them. And they should be paying for that. So we often talk about, at Quorum, we talk about multiple buyer groups, kind of the immediate ones within your path, and the long ones out there, the ones that you would never contact. However, from our experience, 40% of acquisition happens from those longs, right? From the people from the companies out there that you may not see a fit, but they're likely to bid on your business, and certainly would actually have a more healthy auction as a result of having them in the conversation. And we have plenty of examples on that. We don't have time to really get into that, but you have to have a wide enough group with a wide enough strategic reach. So that's a game of good banker, bad banker. So yeah, in this game of life, you don't stop evolving. CEO is the best school for the rest of your life, depending on what you decide to do. Never burn a bridge. Continue to try new things. Like I said, your greatest weakness is your greatest strength. Make it happen. And ask yourself, why not? If you don't risk in this life, you don't get another chance. So do it. That's all I got. Questions? I think it's actually good that we don't have questions because we need to get on to the next panel. But if you guys have questions for me, please, I'm here. I'm here all week. And we also have a Selling Up, Selling Out conference on Friday, which is a 3.5-hour boot camp on M&A. If you're interested in watching that, just get in contact with me, and we'll make sure you're registered for that. It's in Singapore. Thanks.